And you realize that perhaps it's best that when you go out on dates with people, keep philosophy at the footnotes. Because when philosophy enters the picture while you're having a conversation with someone, you're going to make them feel uncomfortable. Because as a man, when a woman asks you questions, what are you doing? Who are you? What's the meaning of your life? You know, you kind of, as a man, you realize that this woman is more of a man than you are, you know, and you're losing a great amount of power and she's making you cheap and meaningless. And then after a while, you say, maybe I should stop doing that. And I think it's a good thing to do because, you know, it is true that human beings don't live by bread alone, that yes, there is an emotional part to you, there is a spiritual part to you, but you have to respect the fact that your belly needs food. You have to respect the fact that as a woman, biologically, your body demands having a child. As a human being, you demand having a roof over your head. And we are creatures after beauty. You don't want a 1-bedroom, you want a 5-bedroom. And you want a big backyard, and you want a beautiful front yard. It's called greed and lust, but it comes with the territory. Human beings are animals who seek pleasure that comes out of beauty. And having a mansion is a beautiful thing. The problem is keeping the balance, which is very difficult. Now, if now the question is, at the age of 15, I entered the world of philosophy. I lived with Plato and Socrates and Descartes and Hume and Bai Sahib and all these stuff for all these figures for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And all of a sudden I realized that I want to get married and have children or move to wherever. Am I not betraying philosophy? Am I not betraying my own wisdom and insights? All the things I have gained from the 20 years of studying philosophy. I'm not really quite sure. It's a difficult thing to say. Instead of, you know, answering my own question directly, which could embarrass me and maybe create unpleasant feelings, let me just approach it this way. If you have ever been in love and ultimately you gifted your companion with your body, in other words, you were physically intimate with your companion and your body housed beautiful emotions. You loved your companion and you love them with your heart and your mind, and therefore now your body, you're going to offer it to him or her. And it's magical. It really is. I mean, the Trinity is complete. Body, mind, soul, he has it all or she has it all. Time passes and you begin to become somewhat aware that yes, physically you're there, emotionally you're absent. Yes, physically you're there, intellectually you're absent. And you realize you're just a body in that environment. And now it's midnight, both of you are in bed, things happen, and now you're engaged in this thing called sex. There are two parts to you. Emotionally, you're not there. I suppose mentally, you're just disgusted. But bodies grinding against each other creates relatively pleasant feelings, enough to overcome the emotions and your awareness. Maybe not. Maybe you just find the entire engagement to be one of obligation. But while you're having it, you feel dirty, you feel cheap. And if in the past, when you made love, I mean, that's what it is, you were making love and now you're just making sex. When you were making love, holding, hugging, caressing was meaningful, It's inspiring, exciting, like the Garden of Eden. Now, after you're done, you just turn around and go to sleep. You're repulsed. And I suppose if you've had an experience where you tasted something that inspired you, and now you find yourself in a place in life where you're doing things out of obligations, you're doing things out of fear. Well, you have no choice but to have, I suppose, two parts to you. A part that says, I hate this. A part that says, I know you hate it, but it's something you got to do. And it's not a bad thing anyways. And now your question is, well, I either want to be aware of the fears all the time so I don't gravitate towards philosophy, or I want to be aware of philosophy so I don't gravitate towards family life. And the best example I can give you is Soren Kierkegaard. You know, Kierkegaard is a Danish philosopher walking around Denmark telling people how awful of Christians they are. And he tells them, you know, it's a Christian environment, but, you know, he tells the people that I'm here to bring Christianity to you. I'm here to teach you what Christianity is. And people kept telling him, we are Christians. He says, no, you guys are fake Christians. I'm going to tell you what real Christianity is. Anyways, at a certain point, I think it was about almost 27, 28, maybe 26, he kind of gets engaged to this girl. But, you know, if you happen to be someone like Kierkegaard, an introvert, and introverts have a tendency of always being reflective. You know, you're social, you make people laugh, but the truth is there is nothing funny about you. Your sense of humor is one of being bleak and gloomy. You're just animated. And so this girl really liked him, and he really liked her as well. But because he was an introvert, because he was a reflective human being, he sits back and says, well, what is it that married people do? He goes to work for about 9-10 hours, makes money, and he goes to work at a job that he despises, he hates. He makes some money, he brings home the paycheck, like $5,000, $2,000 goes for the rent, $1,500 goes to the credit card, $1,000 goes to food, $500 for gas, and in the end you have nothing. And then what happens to your relationship? Initially it starts with love and passion and excitement, and then slowly it just depreciates. It loses its value, like a housing market, or like a car that you take out of the parking lot. The moment the car leaves the lot, you lose about $5,000. If you keep it a couple years, you lose about $10,000. If you keep it for 10 years, you might as well just give it away for free, you know? And he says, well, this is what marriage is. It's just the world of Caesar. And what is it that the world of Caesar does to you? It robs you of your soul. It robs you of your passion. It robs you of your creativity. What does the world of philosophy do for you? It always allows you to reflect on goal, on meaning, on truth, on identity. Which one do I want? Now, the truth is both worlds have their own unique set of problems. Watch this movie, and it's a good movie. It's called Stigmata. For those of you who don't know what Stigmata is, it's the 5 wounds of cross when he was on, you know, the cross being kind of killed alive or butchered alive. And this woman who was suffering the marks of, you know, the wounds, becomes friends with this priest. And the relationship becomes one of romanticism. And there comes a point where he says, she asks him, did you never, like, become interested or were interested in women or sex or relationships? And he says, yeah, of course. I'm a human being. But he continues that, you know, whether you want to be a priest or a family man, the truth is they both have their own set of dilemmas or issues. The question is, which issues would you want to choose? Do you want to deal with the issue of having a job that sucks? Do you want to deal with the issue that every day you go, you are more and more diminished as a human being? Do you want to go home and look at a wife with whom you no longer get along? Do you want to spend your days taking care of kids who will ultimately spit on all the energy and all of your investments? Do you want to be in this relationship and ultimately look yourself in the mirror and see a 60 or 70-year-old man whose life has been stolen by family life? Or do you want to deal with questions that have to do with your spiritual self, your reflective self, your philosophical self? Well, if you choose philosophy, you have to deal with being alone. You have to deal with looking at other people, seeing them holding hands, and having envy inside you. And then philosophically, coming up with tools where you can kind of push out envy and simply bring in acceptance. This is what you chose. Is it going to be a clean cut, choice? The answer is no. You're always going to one day be here, one day be there. The more sensitive you are, the more open you are to both worlds. It means that at 9 o'clock, you want to be in a family life. At 9:05, you want to divorce and go become a hermit. At 9:30, you want to just say, the hell with both, I'm just going to end my life. At 9:45, you say, no, I want to be a family person. At 10 o'clock, you say, no, I think I just want to be a nun or a monk. So remember, the more sensitive you are, the more open you are to all these different conflicts. I'll tell you one story, and then we'll move on to relationships and power. When I became interested in, not so much philosophy, when I became interested in Hussein, this man, and that's the thing you need to understand, that you never become interested in philosophy. You always initially become interested in the philosopher, So if, for example, you're hanging out with Mahatma Gandhi and you see him, just the way he is, or anyone that you idolize, you say, I like the way he expresses compassion. I like the way he expresses ideas. I like the way he speaks. Okay? And then little by little, as you gain maturity and more insight and wisdom, you say, well, I guess I can do those things on my own. I don't need him or her anymore. So initially, when I became interested in Hussein, I used to listen to Persian pop music. But I realized, despite the fact that pop music in Persia, it still contained a good amount of social and political comments. There were some that were quite cheap. And so Hussein said, why don't you listen to traditional music? And traditional music is very, very, very sad. And it's sad because the culture is sad. It's sad because the history is sad. You can't create happiness out of sadness unless you're able to look at your sad culture and create sad poetry. And that is inspiring and exciting. زمن بشنوی پیر آموزگار مکن تکیه بر گردش روزگار که این منزل درد و جای غم است در این دامگه شادمانی کم است. It's beautiful. یوسف گم گشته باز آید به کنعان غم مخور. کلبه احزان شود روزی گلستان غم مخور. That life is tough, but all paths eventually end. Right now, you're on the path of sorrow. It'll end. Joy will come, but joy too is a path that will eventually end. And then sorrow will house you. And then joy will house you. There is no stability in life except understanding. Everything about this is sad. So I began to listen to, traditional music. And so I began to sing. Every day I practice singing for about anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. I wanted to be the youngest Persian singer. But because of over-practice, I messed up my vocal cords. The point, though, I went to the shop one day and he said, so Amir, have you practiced any new songs? I said, yes. And there was a singer, the via Shahram Nazari. He had just come out with the song, poem by Rumi. من چرا دل به تو دادم که دلم میشکنی. And I forget the rest. So he said, why don't you sing it? So I began to sing it. And he shed a couple of tears because I sang the way I teach, with a great amount of passion. And then after 2 hours of, just chatting with him, he looks at me and says, while you were singing, I was praying. Praying for what? I was praying that hopefully your vocal cords will go bad so that you could become interested in the content of the poem as opposed to just being a singer. Because when you become interested in the content, what happens is you have to feel, you have to think, you have to observe, and you have to pay attention day after day after day after day. And that's exactly what happened. My vocal cords went bad. I developed nodules. They had to freeze and then cut them away. And from that point on, whenever I get too excited and I scream or shout, whether singing or in the classroom, my vocal cords are just shot. But what happened in my vocal cords getting shot is that I went to his house every single day. And then philosophy became part of who and what I am. It can't leave me. I was broken in a way where I can have fun, but my fun always rests on being broken, because that is what it means to be a human being. We have been expelled from the Garden of Eden, or from the Garden of Inspiration, or from the Garden of whatever you want to call that brings you stability, joy, comfort, happiness, fulfillment, meaning. All of us have been expelled. But the more broken you are, the more aware you are that you have been expelled, the more you desire to go back. It's like you have lost a companion, and for the first time you've come to realize, you really realize, I'm not talking about fantasy, I'm not talking about romanticism. You realize that you've lost something really, really, really valuable. It's like the prodigal son. My father was always wise. I just lacked the wisdom to see that. Then you see it. If you've been broken in that way, awareness is part of you. The only thing you can do, and that usually takes a while for you to get broken in that way. Should you have this foundational and fundamental brokenness inside you, you should get into a family life. But what you need is not love. What you need is your ability to pretend well. You need to be political. Jesus may be sitting next to you. The moment your husband or your wife comes in, you willingly talk to Jesus and say, listen, I'm just going to put you on the cross and nail you to the cross, because I got to go say hi to my husband or my wife. I'll be back, unnail you, bring you down from the cross, like around midnight, and then we can sit and continue our conversation. But for 8 hours, you pretend. Is it leading and living a double life? Absolutely. Is it a benefit to your body and to your soul? Definitely. Hopefully, well, maybe not. When you have children, what you'll do is that you'll realize that kids don't listen. And as a mother or a father, you have to keep saying the same stuff 1,000 times, if not 1,000,000. If you have had most of your life, you've been living a physical life, and by that I mean you were occupied with going to school, getting your driver's license, getting a job, and now you realize that there is this other party that's come to life, which is the world of philosophy, or the world of reflection for you. You're doing the baby steps, and which means that there is an infant inside you called the little philosopher. But there is this mature part of you, which is the mature business person. So there's a good chance that every time your little philosopher wants to go sit with a book, the business part of you says, paycheck. And so you have no choice but to forget. What usually is needed is someone who has a bit more maturity, who's been a bit more seasoned, a bit more experienced. They need to be a constant, they need to have a constant presence in your life. And every time you look at them, something about you just blossoms, opens. It's both positive and negative. It's negative because it creates a good amount of chaos in your life. Because you know, for example, an hour later you have to go back home and face the reality of your choice, which is, I have a husband or a wife, I got kids, I don't want to have them, but I have them nevertheless. I have to do what I can to survive. So you can create the awareness by reading books. You can create the awareness by listening to audios. You need a living, quacking human being always in your life. Always. Always, 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 always. And I think I shared this with you a couple of days ago. I'll do it again. It comes from the Urantia book. You shouldn't read it. It's about 3,000 pages. The missing years of Jesus Christ from the age 12 to about 30, where he looks at one of his disciples and he basically says to the disciple, after, of course, the disciple having asked Jesus, you know, that guy looks interested in the things you're saying. Why don't you just, have him as a disciple? Let him follow us. He says, nah. Well, why not? He's interested. No. The only way you can have a student is to have that student come and live with you. It means that, yes, you can go to Laney College from 9 to about 12, then you go home. That's where Jesus is. You can go to work, and then you go home. That's where Jesus is. And it could be metaphoric. It could be not so metaphoric. I think initially it can be metaphoric. It has to be something physical. You have to go to a physical environment. And that physical space contains forces that'll just smack you in the face and you wake up and you remember. No one can do this on their own. Life is just far, far, far too powerful. It's impossible. You're dealing with habits, you're dealing with complacency, you're dealing with lust, you're dealing with pride or ego. There are too many obstacles before you. And so you need someone who's overcome, not all of them, some of them, and not completely to some degree. And those people can kind of help you. Does that? Relationships and power. There was a time where, imagine if you're able to kind of take back yourself maybe 500 or 600 years ago, maybe 200 years ago. Say certain parts of Africa, many parts of Africa, Mexico, India, the Middle East. You're 27 and you're walking to, say, Pete's coffee shop, and you pass by a young woman. She happens to be 15 or 16. Let's just make it American legal age. She's 18. You go to your mom and you say, Mom, there was a girl. She's really nice. And it's not because you know her. It's not because you know her name. It's not because you've dated her. It's not because you know her family. You have zero knowledge about her. But what you do know is this. Your village has, or your city has about 500 people. Everybody in that community is a Christian. Everybody on Sunday goes to church. Religion hovers over everybody's life. There are only two genders, a man and a woman. That's it. And rules are defined by your society. You go to work, you make money. A woman, she's a housewife. And because everybody's name is so important in your society, everybody tries to be on their best behavior. Because once you lose your name, you will lose your reputation. Your name is your value. If you have zero value, no one's going to buy you. Even if your daughter has a PhD, but as parents, you have lost your value, your reputation, your community, your daughter will never be married to anyone in that community. Because eventually kids will turn out to be very much like their parents. Are there exceptions? Absolutely. But for the most part, kids will turn out to be like their parents. So 2, 3, 4, 500 years ago, your mom goes out, looks at the girl, follows her home, knocks on the door, the mother opens the door. And the questions are very simple. My son, 26, is a bricklayer, makes money. We're going to buy him a house, we're going to buy him a car. Is your daughter ready for marriage? Will you permit your daughter to get married to our son? They'll invite you in. The parents talk while the two of you are sitting there. 10 minutes later, you're married. But keep in mind the foundation. Everybody's a Christian. Nobody watches porn. Nobody drinks. Nobody smokes. Nobody uses foul language. There is a dress code. You don't invite people, anyone, to your environment because you show skin. And everybody in your community is black or brown or white. Diversity does not exist. The only diversity is temperamentally. What you're asking now is Oakland, 500,000 people from an extremely diverse background. What happens to you when you see someone that you find yourself attracted to? Well, they look good. But what you lack is the history. And it's something that Aristophanes, even Plato argued, which is the following. What you have in the 21st century is the following. 500 years ago, when you cut an apple, you have a sharp knife. You cut the apple, both halves, they're extremely refined. They're smooth. What you have in the 21st century is a butter knife, and you want to cut an apple. What do? You cut the apple, but you have all these jagged edges. You come from a different history, a different background, different belief system. She comes from a different background, different belief systems. So what you have are an identity, and in that identity, regardless of how stupid, destructive it may be, there is power in it. There's a good amount of anger, aggression in it. You have your own background. In that background, you also have power, i.e. aggression, i.e. history. What you're saying is now, these two people from two completely different backgrounds, two completely different set of experiences come together. They have been cut with a stick, not even a butter knife. They need to kind of grind against each other for the next 20 years to become smooth. And what happens in any relationship? Well, you have a great amount of not conversation, not discussion. You have arguments that lead into fights, you sleeping on the sofa. And if you're able to survive the relationship for the next 10, 15, 20 years, what will happen is, you know what areas you should just abstain from talking? All of it's about power. You can't survive life without power. Love is good for, a good 2 weeks, but If you want to survive life, power.
I just want to expound a little bit. Whose power? Is it the relationship, the power of the man, the power of the woman, the power of the woman, the power of the
It depends who's louder, who's angry, who's more aggressive. Eventually, someone has to submit. People divorce because no one submits to the other person's power. I mean, look, have you seen like UFC fights on TV? You know, I mean, you're like a mouse, you're fighting an elephant. You do the best you can. There comes a point where you realize the elephant is just sitting on you, choking you. You tap out. But you put up a good fight. And then the referee comes and, the guy who kind of just demolished you, his hand is raised and you hug and you say, yeah, you're just, far too better than I am. And that's how it is in all relationships. But it means that, for example, because let's say your companion happens to be very emotional, it doesn't matter how rational you are, her emotions will overpower you. There comes a point where she's not as emotional, but she wants to do a few things, and your rationality overpowers her. So you have different times during the day where you have power over her and she has power over you. Now, if you're talking about more fundamental stuff, imagine I'm a woman and you're a man. You're like a non-practicing Jew or a non-practicing Christian. And I'm an agnostic or a Christian or whatever, an atheist. And we get together. I get pregnant. And, you're able to observe society and how much of a mess it is. And all of a sudden you say, I want my kid to go to a Catholic school and I want to go to church every Sunday. Say, I don't even believe in God. I don't really care. Now that's a fundamental issue. You're talking about a child and you want to protect this child. The things that didn't matter before now matters.
life. Glad we went out of time.
It's good to see all of you. Have a nice day. Take care. This is Wednesday, right? Okay, see you next week, Monday.